Okay, good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to welcome you here this evening. And we have a very meaningful event that is planned for tonight. It is my opportunity and my privilege to be able to introduce, firstly, twins Charley and Alex Cowen, and also our moderator, Timna Jacks. Now, tonight, of course, is special just by way of prelude because you know, I suppose, particularly during a time of COVID and literally tonight entering into lockdown number 2, and I do note that there are still people logging on, but St Kilda Shule is one of those sort of organizations that tends to start things quite punctually. So we're welcoming everyone coming, and they'll hear the protracted introduction as we go. But as we do enter lockdown tonight at 11:59, the reality is that it is going to impact a lot of people in a negative way, and it's going to create, unfortunately, negative experiences in the lives of many people. And often in life, we can't control what happens in life, and the only thing we really have control over or influence over is the way in which we respond to it. So tonight's event is themed Creating Meaningful Legacy from Loss. And we're going to be hearing from 2 sisters who are remarkable. Alex and Charley Cowen lost their father quite suddenly in a terrible paragliding accident. And at that time, of course, many people in the community, myself included, who had not met their late father, Ben, but did learn through articles in the newspapers and just from friends and congregants who did know and who do know the family, about the tragedy and what had occurred. But what many of us were not necessarily expecting is what Alex and Charley were going to do, I suppose, with that grief and the loss that they had experienced. It's entirely understandable and justifiable, certainly talking from a pastoral perspective, for people who experience grief and loss to, I guess, become somewhat more retentive in life and pensive and not necessarily feel motivated to give to the community at that time. But what Charley and Alex have remarkably been able to achieve is to have kind of transformed or harnessed that negative energy into something that actually benefits the community at large. And in doing so, after the loss of their father, they were forced to think about the importance of children having financial security following tragic or traumatic events. And of course, this conjured up a number of feelings in their own hearts and in their own minds. And they translated those thoughts and feelings into action. And together they founded Parachute for Kids, which is a not-for-profit organization that provides micro grants for children under the age of 18 who are impacted by trauma, which is caused by events such as death or divorce or significant injury or other circumstances which are, of course, beyond the control of the children. This organization, Parachutes, provides financial support to those who have experienced economic disadvantage as a result of these events. Now, we're going to hear from Alex and Charley directly. Our moderator this evening is Timna Jacks, and Timna, who I've known for a number of years because she was herself a journalist, an outstanding journalist, dare I say it, at the Australian Jewish News initially, and I'd worked with her quite extensively on communal matters. I thank her for only sharing those elements of my professional life, which I would have wanted to go public. The other stuff, thankfully, she was able to somehow cloud that one. So thanks for that, Timna. But has moved on to The Age and is now an outstanding journalist over there as well, covering much more broader issues than far beyond just the Jewish community. And what many people do know, and some online now may not know, is that there is in fact a parallel in Timna's life to that of Alex and Charley, in that Timna, and this is something that has been shared publicly, and also news articles were published some years ago. Timna's father, unfortunately, was diagnosed with motor neurons disease when she was in her mid-teens, and then passed away just a few years later when Timna was finishing VCE. So I know that Timna is able to understand and to really empathize and, I suppose, experience that which Alex and Charley and other children who have suffered these tragedies are experiencing. So I think that tonight's talk and dialogue is going to be far more than just, I guess, scripted questions and answers, but really coming from the heart between people who have had these difficult and challenging experiences. And what I find remarkable in both instances is that the community outpouring was really quite significant in coming to assist and to and I suppose just to share in the pain and to be there during those difficult times. So with that in mind, it's my honor and privilege on behalf of the St Kilda Shule to firstly thank the three of you for coming on, and I will do more formal thank yous at the end of tonight's session, but to formally hand over to Timna, who will open with some questions to Alex and Charley about their experiences, and thereafter we will open questions to the audience. With regard to questions to the audience, those who are logged on know that you're on mute. If you would like to ask a question, please do so through the chat room and just to a question to all or to myself, and I'll make sure that Timna receives those questions and is able to ask them on your behalf. So thank you all for joining us once again, and Timna, I do now hand over to you.
Thank you, Rabbi Glasman, for that lovely introduction. It's a real privilege to be here to interview two extraordinary young women, Alex and Charley, who have managed to do what many of us hope we could achieve in the face of adversity, and that's create something positive. You know, most of us might assume that after losing a parent so prematurely and at such a young age, that this would leave a big painful hole in one's life, and there may be a tendency to withdraw and be quite private about your grief. And I'm sure both of you girls have experienced that over the years, but somehow you've managed to find an opening and you've built something really beautiful. How did you find the strength to do that?
Do you want to? I think that through all the grief and everything, it's something that's actually really driven us and given us passion to bring Parachute to life. And I think it's something that has made it that much more important to us. And I think that's actually how it has become successful, because we've kind of used this grief into trying to help make sure that other kids going through something similar don't have to experience any anxiety around the costs of tertiary activities.
Was that an anxiety that you had after you lost your dad?
Yeah, I think completely. We both, after everything happened, we had no idea what our life was going to look like and what the certainties were, and what would be able to remain the same. So having the security would have been something that could have changed a lot of how we felt initially. And we were very lucky that nothing else had to really change in our life other than the loss of our father. But I think there was a bit of anxiety at the beginning, and no kids have to feel that anxiety or actually face more things changing than what actually has to change.
And Alex, was that your experience as well, feeling anxiety about your future and you know, where you'd go to school or what your future was going to look like after your dad passed away?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely experienced some really hard mental health period after my father passed away, and I think Parachute was something that helped bring me out of that dark period in my life. I have experienced a broad range of different mental health issues over the course of his passing and sort of the different stages of grief that come with that. But something that has definitely helped me and inspired me throughout it is knowing that there will be kids on the other side who won't have to experience those kind of emotions to the same extent.
Because you know, you were so young when your dad passed away. Were you both 12 at the time? Is that right? Yeah. So I'm assuming that very few, if any, of your friends had gone through something remotely like it. Did you feel quite isolated after it happened, or different from your friends after you lost your father?
Definitely. It was little things that made us feel abnormal in a way. people who could go to Chadstone on the weekend and get driven there, whereas if mum was doing something and couldn't take us, or if she was doing something with our brother, definitely people talking about how their dad was that morning, and we just couldn't relate in that same way. And those little sort of differences made us feel quite isolated.
And tell us a little bit about your dad. What was he like, and what was your relationship like with him? Do you want to start, Alex?
He was a person that you felt like you would know after speaking to him for a minute. He was kind and he was hilarious and would approach everybody with a big bear hug, and made everybody feel welcome no matter who they were or where they were from.
He's just full of unconditional love for everybody, and welcomed everyone with open arms, and such a caring guy, put everyone before himself, always made everyone feel loved and supported 100% of the time. And I feel so lucky to have had 12 years with my dad than to have eternity with someone else.
That's a beautiful way to look at it. You know, Rabbi Glasman mentioned how I lost my own father, and I guess one of the things that kind of differentiates our experiences is that, my dad, he had a shocking disease, but we knew what his fate was going to be, and we had time to prepare and to say our goodbyes. And, in your situation, one day you had a dad, and then the next day he was gone. Can you talk us through that day and the shock that you must have felt, and the process of coming to accept that he was not there anymore?
I think it took, for me personally, it took a while to for everything to kind of process. I think initially it just didn't feel real for a very long time, actually. And it just felt like he was away or something. But just processing that was the last time I would see him was something that I don't think I have even come to terms with now. Still now, wow, yeah. It's something that it's still crazy to think about for me. And it's still really hard to process, but it took a while of just being in shock, and like my body kind of shut down, and I wasn't able to process what had happened. Like I heard people telling me, but it wasn't sinking in. And I think I had a very slow grieving process, and it started a bit later on than maybe Alex did, because my body kind of shut down, and I didn't really let anything process for a while.
And Alex, tell us about your process, your grieving process. And
it was very different to that. For me, I was quite emotional for definitely the weeks after he had passed away. I think that I wouldn't stop crying, and I was really upset. I think that, this is a Shule, this in Kilda Shule, I just bring a bit of Judaism into it. I think that the Jewish process really helped me in that regard, because I was able to go through that process of mourning and that process of grieving, which was definitely really helpful for me. But even today, and even years after he had passed away, I still didn't believe it was true. It still feels unreal at some points, just because of the lack of closure that was there.
That's totally understandable. I think, when a lot of, people, I think in a lot of instances, people really want to show their support for someone who might be grieving, but they might not know how. What were the things that certain family members or friends did at the time that touched you or helped you feel supported, that you recall?
I think at the beginning, I think my friends were such a huge support. I remember every day, especially during the first few weeks, I felt so, like my body just felt really off. So my friends would come up to my room and just feed me to make sure that I was eating and sleeping, and they would make me get dressed every day so that I would kind of still feel like a normal person. And so there's the friends that I was really close to that I would cry with at school. They'd come with me to a private room just to like talk to me. And then the other friends that would be there as a distraction and always make me smile when I feel like I couldn't.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Especially sort of soon after he died, they were there to comfort and give support and cry with us. But definitely after a little bit, it was so helpful to have someone to laugh with, have some dark humor with at some points. I think that created almost a stronger friendship with my friends.
And you had quite a unique experience in that, you know, a lot of people knew your dad and knew about his death. There were news stories about it at the time. What was that like for you to have something so intimate become quite public? Alex, do you want to start?
There were definitely a lot of people that I couldn't remember the names of that would come up to us in the streets. We have a little term in our house that we like to call bagel facing. So it's when somebody is giving you condolences, but gives you some kind of carbohydrate to go with it, which usually is bagels. And that was quite a surreal experience with how many bags of bagels we were given straight after his passing.
I think it was kind of surreal, the amount of people that reached out to us, like initially, even on the day that it happened, or like in that first week, the amount of people that I didn't even know had heard of me before that had kind of reached out, maybe like texted me or something, or yeah, even seeing people on the street. Just, it was crazy how many people knew, and how many people my dad touched their lives. Like we had no idea how many people he'd impacted that felt so connected to him. And I think personally, I've found out more about my dad in these past 3 years than I had in his whole life.
Yeah, right. What?
Just quickly adding on to that. I think that one of the main inspirations was to create Parachute was because we found out after his passing that his legacy was so much more, and the impact that he had, we wanted to continue creating that impact.
So what did you learn about him, about his entrepreneurial spirit and generally about him as a person?
I found out so many stories about him in boarding school when he was a child. I found out stories from my side of the family, so his side of the family, that I hadn't heard about before, that he was shy when he was younger and that he was naughty and sneaky, and definitely things about his teenage years that I sort of wouldn't have known otherwise.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that covered it.
You say, yeah. And what about you? I mean, you know, sometimes when you're faced with trauma, you can kind of look back at your early life and think, you know, life was actually quite good beforehand. It was quite easy. And perhaps you feel like you've grown up a lot over the past few years. I'm not sure, but how do you think this experience has changed you?
I think it's given me a lot of perspective. And now when I have things stressing me out, or I find that I get kind of less upset over the small things now because I put everything into perspective, and I realize that I take a step back and I realize how lucky I am that I have an amazing supportive family, and that things could have been so much worse, and how lucky I am. So I think it's really given me a better perspective, and I have the ability to kind of look at the bigger picture when little things happen.
You're right.
I would definitely say that I'm a lot more grateful for the people that I have around me. I think we take a lot of things for granted, especially with we keep on looking for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and it's a good experience to sort of to get some perspective and step back and be thankful for the people we have around us, because we're not promised anybody, but we can hold on to them as long as we have them.
I wanted to, and we're going to get to Parachute in a second, I promise, but you know, if you were talking to, you know, another kid, say, who might be facing loss, or, you know, a similar type of loss or trauma, perhaps someone who might be getting a micro grant under the charity that you're setting up, what would your advice be?
I think I would start off by saying that while right now you might be feeling really intense feelings of grief, one day in the future, you'll be able to think about this person you've lost and feel grateful for the time you've had and be able to reflect on your memories of them as a really happy and positive thing instead of just grieving that you no longer have them.
Yeah, I would say this is for right now, and a couple days in the future, or a couple weeks, or a couple months, you will begin to smile and you begin to feel like yourself again. And slowly but surely, you will feel like almost a better, more grown person, a version of yourself.
So let's continue with that theme, because Alex, you were saying that, parachute is one of the things that really kind of lifted you out of that darkness and propelled you forward. And I think you may have come up with the idea initially. So tell me a little bit about where you were and what you were doing when the idea of the charity was born.
I was on a bus, sitting next to my friend, riding back from a soccer game. And so we turned to each other and we're discussing about how grateful we were that we were given this experience, that we were able to laugh and have fun with our friends, and our differences didn't set us apart. We were a community together. And from that, and then it hit me that experience isn't guaranteed. Nobody is just allowed that, and there was a chance that wouldn't have been my life if something had gone differently. And so automatically, I emailed the principal of my school to set up a sort of a meeting to discuss the creation of an organisation that would allow kids who have gone through trauma to do the things that every child should be guaranteed.
Wow. And so how come you're engaging your principal? What was that? What was your vision at the time when you were sending that email?
So it was a bit different to what Parachute is now. It was originally supposed to involve things like support groups and things that would create sort of a community of kids with trauma, but to keep it more anonymous and to make sure the kids were feeling more normalized within their communities and not sort of creating a different one. We thought it would be great to go with micro grants for kids who had experienced trauma, so that they could do things within their communities. So like having after school activities or having birthday parties or going on school holiday programs. But approaching my principal was such an incredible experience. Some of you may know him, Mark Light. He is probably one of the most understanding, generous people you'll ever meet. He introduced us to our mentor. He helped us get off the ground. He would have meetings probably maybe once a month, once every 2 months, to discuss where we were at and what was happening and how we were going forward.
He was the most supportive and passionate guy right from the beginning. When she had this crazy idea, and he immediately jumped on board and kept us motivated and kept pushing us forward and kept this thing going instead of just an idea. And I think at the beginning, he was the most supportive person in the whole creation that really made this come to life.
Yeah, I can believe that. He was my English teacher at school, and he was always lovely. So I know exactly what you're talking about. But it sounds like the school's been really supportive of you throughout this whole journey. Is that right?
It's been incredible. They've let us speak in assembly twice and
be part of the school fetes, bake sales,
fundraisers at school, and connecting us with different people and other schools as well. They've been so incredible.
And so how do people go about donating to the charity? How does it work? If you want to support the charity, how do you go about that?
Well, it's very easy to access on our website. We've got a donate page. I think it goes straight to, I'm forgetting the website name, that it goes
parachute.org.au.
No, it's in the web. Anyway, the donation page, but it's it's very easy to access, and we made it so that it's accessible for anybody, no matter how big or small the donation is.
And also, if donating isn't a possibility, one of the biggest ways to support Parachute is just by spreading the word and referring people in need as well.
And so does the money go towards people within the Jewish community or people outside of it as well?
So we know that there's a lot of support within the Jewish community. So it was really important for us that we sort of spread out a little bit and made sure the people in wider areas of Victoria were included. And so most of the grant applications that have been submitted are not actually from within the Jewish community.
Okay, interesting. And so, Alex, you came up with this idea, and Charley, when did you get involved, and how did that come about?
At first, I'd always wanted to be involved, but it was a more gradual process. At first, I was just helping design some different flyers and things, and I was just supporting Alex. And then slowly I got more involved, and now we're partners and co-CEOs.
And twins.
And
Is it tricky running a business together, given that you're siblings?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there are definitely pros and cons to it. We definitely find that we can get on each other's nerves, but we work really well as a team together. We've had a lot of experience before Parachute having to work in a team. So I think that this is just helping us both grow our friendship and our sort of friendship as siblings, but also growing our partnership as co-CEOs.
And over time, we've learned where each other's skills are, and we have completely different skills. So it actually works really well that we kind of balance each other out. And it also really helps that we live in the same house. So we kind of keep each other on top of everything, keep organized, get everything done.
And one of your board members, your mum's also in that house. But we'll get to that.
Yeah.
We'll get to that in a second. So what are your different skills? How do you complement each other?
Well, I'm definitely more on the business side of things. I am probably more of the organizer with the events that we do and the fundraising things that we do. And Charley, you want to?
I do more kind of behind the scenes work with the actual the grant process and cross-checking references and emailing different people who have applied.
And how do you get the message out there? Are you kind of meeting people or networking, or how are you making people aware of Parachute?
So things like this, where we are talking to people. We were on earlier this week on David Southwick's show, which is on Facebook as well. Definitely word of mouth is great. We've been able to get a lot of our applicants that way, but also through social media and
our website.
Yeah, and our website. So all three together have created a really good sort of networking way.
And what do you think your dad would have thought of Parachute if he was here to see it?
He always instilled the idea of giving back in us forever. And we know that it was one of his biggest values. So I think, especially the creation of Parachute, it was a way to kind of continue with his legacy. So yeah, I think it's something we've always known that giving back was something really important to him. So it really means a lot to us as well.
I think that message that he would have had has definitely been given to us throughout definitely his side of the family. They've sort of tried to continue on his legacy throughout the part of it, throughout the creation of it, which has been really amazing.
I might ask Lara to join us now, so we'll find out what your mum thinks of it, if that's okay, Lara. Because I know, Lara, that initially you were slightly cool on the idea. Is that right?
No, I was very interested in what they came up with, but I think, they were 13. I mean, Alex's brainchild, 13, and I was certainly too overwhelmed to drive it, and she wouldn't let me anywhere near it, and I really didn't think it was actually going to happen. And we did have an early issue where somehow the idea got out, or because she had this support from the school, and then people started to support it, and she started to talk about it, and people started to give money, and there was no organisation, and there was no bank account, and I had this cash sitting in my study, and I didn't know how it was all going to come together. So that was my concern, less about the idea than the execution.
Yeah, sure. Okay, fair enough. And then how did it go from that to being what it is today, from your perspective?
I'd love to say then it just sort of smoothly happened. But actually there was a big fight one night between my very strong-willed daughter, who absolutely insisted that at 13 she could set up a whole not-for-profit, tax, bank accounts, legals, everything.
Wow.
And I said to her, I'm going to shut it down. It's just getting wind that you cannot control anymore. We'll wait till you're older. She stomped off, went to bed and came back and said, fine, you can help. And then to her credit, we had a lot of help, you know, sat at some meetings and sort of said, wow, I didn't realise all of this goes into pulling together an organisation. I'm learning so much.
Yeah, wow.
And then, you know, Charlie's involvement as well, the two of them really have, to their credit, aside from, you know, both of them are doing sort of, you know, VCE subjects. They're heavily involved in the community, debating and, you know, everything. It's right, school magazine, you know, Ajax Footy Club, the whole thing. And they still manage to answer every email. They thank every single person who's given a donation personally. They get so excited when somebody has applied. And, you know, someone comes running downstairs, oh, we've got someone who wants help. Listen to this story. It's not, you know, it's not lip service. It is incredibly, deeply passionate and personal for them.
And that kind of determination to, you know, build something really positive out of loss and to kind of execute it, you know, really, really well and have an impact. Does that kind of sound like Ben? Are you like that? Where do you think that comes from?
I think we raised, but I mean, all our kids were raised knowing that they had privilege and that they had a responsibility to give back. And that's what, you know, Ben was involved with the UIA and I've had my causes, and we both, you know, instilled that. And so I don't think there was a choice for that. My kids were never going to be victims. So even this, and people have had trouble, especially, you know, where the girls have had this incredible, their grief has been intense and it's come out very differently for both of them, for all three of my children. But at no stage were any of them, you know, they have had a determination, all three of them, that Ben would be remembered with laughter and with love and with stories, and his legacy would be something that was meaningful and positive as a contribution. And I think that, you know, you don't know how your kids are going to cope with anything, you know. And as the girls remind me, you know, if ever I get self-indulgent about, you know, being a widow, they go, well, you don't know what it's like to lose a father. And I know that you have that experience. And I think it's so different. And for them, it changes all the time. And this is something that they can keep as a road mark for how, you know, of success and of building something that will always be there. And I think, you know, we've been approached to just, you know, sort of make it national, and the girls have said slowly, we want to get it right and we want to do it and we want to make sure that it goes on forever in his name.
You know, you talk about, you kind of refer to the experience of losing a husband, and I hope you don't mind, but I did have a look on your Facebook page, and you wrote so beautifully about this. And there was one post, nearly brought me to tears, where you wrote a birthday letter to Ben 6 months after his passing. It would have been his 51st birthday. And I hope you don't mind, I'm just going to read out a couple of sentences because it's incredibly moving. You write, slowly I've continued the unrelenting process of untying you. Sometimes it's so painful, but mostly I take comfort in the excuse it gives me to stay connected to you. And I dread the day there is no more mail delivered to our house bearing your name. So I can imagine it's been a really lonely few years.
Yeah, and it's funny you raise his birthday is on Sunday, so we're reaching the milestone of that letter. Yeah, it has been, but you know, and this isn't about me, and I really want to make the girls, you know, and their organisation front and centre, and they have, you know, it's impossible to be truly lonely with three kids who are incredibly active and incredibly resilient and incredibly intent on remaining positive about life. And I think, you know, the tie that I talk about, you know, maybe for me it was mail or whatever, this is the tie for them. This that they have created in his name for them is about him and the tie.
I think what's so, I guess, special about Parachute, and from what I can see about the way that your family has coped with this loss, is that you've really welcomed people's support and kind of been able to rally support for your family. And there were some references to Ben's Army on your Facebook page. Lara, do you want to talk, or even the girls, do you want to talk about, because some people kind of want or need support, but they don't know how to ask. How did you know to ask, and was that a difficult thing to do when you're in so much pain?
Well, no, it was easy because everybody wanted to do something. You know, I mean, everybody was saying, and this is partly what Parachute was born out of as well, but the call for Ben's Army was going, we're going to need, there are things that are now missing. And it's interesting because as the time has moved on, particularly where the girls are concerned, you know, the idea of male role models have been very present for my son, but not so much for my daughters. And we talk about that a lot, you know, that all my girlfriends gathered around them, and they've got heaps of people who have been, and in a way, you know, particularly Mark Light's response to them, and you know, seeing how it's just different where you have an adult male in your life, or you don't have one, losing it at 12, you know, how you see the world. But I think so many people stepped up and said, what can we do? And that's why people started throwing money at Parachute. I think girls can talk to this, but it was like, in the beginning, it was like, oh, this is in Ben's name. We want to remember him. We want to do something. Girls, would you say that?
Definitely. It was amazing because there'd been so much support originally for just getting us through sort of the first couple stages of grief, just making sure we could get our lives back on track and put everything in order. And then when Parachute started, it was the same response. And for some, especially within our peers at school, they really wanted to be involved. They really wanted to help and be part of the legacy that our dad had left.
And, you know, like one thing, it kind of seems like, you know, it's something that I think all three of you really show is, you know, you've obviously dealt with great sadness, but you're also experiencing a lot of joy in your life and opportunity and positivity. So it's possible, so those two kind of emotions can coexist, can't they?
Definitely. The thing that is definitely a misconception about losing a loved one and grief is that people think that it's like grief stops at a certain point, and that at one point you're sort of not over it, but the sadness stops. But it doesn't. It just exists in a different kind of way. And if that means on his birthday we smile and we remember him in a happy light, while still being sad that he's not there, it's not the same as originally being so upset that he isn't there. And I think even today, when we're facing new milestones or things are happening that we want to have a conversation with him, we look back on that in a different kind of grief, in sort of a bittersweet grief, because we know what his reaction would have been. We just want him to be there.
Charley, did you want to add to that, or was beautiful sentiment?
Yeah, I think that I'm trying to remember what the original question was.
Just how you can experience great joy and sadness at the same time.
Oh, completely. I think that, again, we just feel so lucky that we had him in our lives at all. So I think that remembering stories about him and talking to old friends of his from his childhood that we'd never met before, it's been amazing finding all these things out about him and remembering his life through other people even. And we grieve over that he's not around anymore, but we just feel so blessed that we got to experience these things.
You're all very incredibly positive and such inspiring people. I'm sure everyone listening would absolutely agree. So thank you for being so open and generous with your experiences. So Rabbi Glasman's opened it up to questions. We've just got a couple here. So I'm just going to ask you. This one's from Rob. He wants to know, how does Parachute access grant applications and who does the assessments? And he also wants to know, outside of the donations, do they have other forms of funding?
So anyone can nominate themselves for a grant, or they can be nominated by someone else. If they nominate themselves, they have to provide us with a reference. So that can be a teacher, principal,
Okay, yeah.
A religious guide, a psychologist, anyone like that we can confirm that they're legitimate. And then we'll get in contact with them and start the process of giving them the grant.
And as for the raising money goes and the funding, so far it has been from individual funders. We're hoping soon to maybe apply for some bigger grants to help fund us. But at the moment, it's not that necessary, as we're still being established and people are still learning about it and applying for the grants. But when that point comes that we do need more funding, we're definitely going to look into that.
And we've got another question from Mick. Perhaps you've already answered this, and you can say so, and I can ask something else. But he wants to know, what can we do? What can we do more to help Parachute? Is there anything else that people can do to support you?
So spreading the word, absolutely, would be amazing. Following us on social media, following our journey would be incredible. But where we definitely want to get sort of, we've had a lot of people asked to be volunteers and help in the process. So we're trying to establish some positions that people can be part of, definitely to make sure we can get some more people involved.
I mean, and it's worth mentioning there, just as one of a big shout out in a way, it goes to a very close friend of the family, Natasha Stipanov, who works at Crown, pulled together the Crown Foundation and had the girls present. And the people who were in that and again, it was early days, saying, what can we do? Can we process invoices? Do you want to come and use the kitchens at Crown to do a bake sale? You know, everybody sort of helping, and the girls have gone, yes, we'd love all that. We've just got to work out when.
And I might just ask one final question, unless there's, and people just feel free to add anything else you want. But girls, what's the future vision for your organisation? If you could achieve your dream for what Parachute would be, what does that look like?
I think definitely going national, making sure that no child in Australia has to go without those tertiary experiences. But also just to have sort of more people know about us, so that more people can access the organisation. I think that's definitely a goal to have, to be really well known.
And I think that each year as we grow, maybe increasing the number of people that we can support every year, that would be an incredible goal for us to achieve.
And noble goals at that. It looks like we do have another audience question, so we'll just ask this one final one and then maybe wrap it up. It's from Alex, and they want to know, how have you both supported each other to grieve, and also where does your brother fit into that picture?
I think Alex has been one of the most incredible supports for me the entire time. He's always.
Is this question from Alex? From your brother? I don't know.
She's always just across the hall to have a chat with, or because we all three of us have been going through the same thing, so we can relate to each other, and we're always there to distract each other. And we're very close with our brother Mitch as well, and he's the most amazing and understanding guy. And we all just support each other, or distract each other, just hang out and kind of make each other feel better, or remember times with our dad together.
Alex, did you want to add to that?
I absolutely agree with what you're saying. We've created a really good sort of support system for ourselves. It's not uncommon for us to sit down and have a family dinner and talk about the things that we remember that he did, and just bring him up in conversation, and remember him. I think our brother has definitely taken on some of the roles that Dad used to do. which has been an amazing thing that he's done. And so I think just having each other, because there are those days where we feel sad and that we feel more grief, maybe randomly, or maybe it's because it's his birthday, or it's our birthdays or something like that. And so just to have each other there, to have a hug, or to lend an inspirational sentiment, then I think that definitely is helpful.
I think it would be slightly remiss of us not to mention what an inspiration your mum is, running multiple businesses. Lara, you're on multiple boards. You're the president of King David School and the board member of Parachute. So, girls, what have you learnt from your mum and the way that she's responded to this as well?
I think that our mum's been one of my biggest inspirations for my entire life. Whenever she sets her mind to anything, she always, she can conquer anything she puts her mind to. And it's always, she always inspired me, and I've always looked up to her so much. And I think she's the most incredible woman. And just living with her as a guide has been, I've been so lucky to be living on the same roof.
I think she's told of the story of how Parachute became what it did. I think having her around, we sometimes butt heads because we're both very opinionated people. But in that same way, we both help lift each other up and get the best out of each other. And sometimes that'll mean a more aggressive debate, but at other times that means that becoming the best version of ourselves. And definitely with this, I see her as an icon in a way. She works hard, she takes care of kids, and at no point does she ever complain. At no point does she get angry at us. And so it's amazing to have that inspiration in the house to just look at and know that we can do anything that we set our minds to.
And also, especially being under 18 and starting an organisation, our mum just immediately put her hand up to be on the board and be a director of Parachute, and just was so passionate about it, and was so willing to help with enthusiasm and as much passion as we had to kind of turn this vision into a reality.
And Lara, can I just ask, how do you do it all? You're so extremely successful. You're obviously an adoring mum, and still grieving the loss of your husband. How do you have the strength to do it all?
Well, Alex is lying. I do complain all the time. Ben left me with a life that was built for two people to run. And so it's, I complain a lot. But no, they're great kids. I mean, they are, I'm not ever able to get into self-pity. And it's very tempting a lot of the time because I miss him all the time. And I think one of our mantras, Ben and I both, during our marriage, was you just say yes. When you're asked, you say yes, and then you work out how to do it. And I don't think you just fit things into the time. I love what I do for my work. I have a passion for the community to be involved and to get, and I have a skill set that works. So if I can add value, I want to be involved. And I think, most of the time, the girls are right. We support each other. I don't feel like there's a lot of yelling about, glasses left on the sink, but at the end of the day, no one knows how to open a dishwasher in our house, like every mother. But they actually are all amazing. They are all, I don't have an issue with any of them. And they, will call me when I'm becoming, full of regret or self-pity or whatever, and go, hang on, look at what you have. And they're the ones that keep our family positive.
Yeah. Well, I think you all kind of feed off each other in this really beautiful symbiotic way, and it's a real inspiration to the rest of us. And just want to thank you so much for your time and agreeing to talk. You've all been really generous. Was there anything else that anyone wanted to say? Or
I might just add something very quickly.
Go ahead.
My dad, he used to say this thing where he would just, when we would walk up these really steep hills, he would say, up, up, up the hill. And I've sort of taken that on as a bit of a self-thing. I think Charley has too, that when it gets tough, and it will at some point in everybody's life, you just got to get up, up, up the hill. And you got to keep pushing, because when you reach the top of the hill, you're there, and it works. And you've just got to keep pushing yourself sometimes when it gets a bit harder, because you know that in the end, it'll work out.
We also want to say a huge thank you for talking to us today and for having us virtually here.
Yeah, thank you so much for letting us use this platform to help
spread the word.
Yeah, spread our message, and let other people sort of know what we do and who we are.
Thank you so much. And on behalf of the St Kilda Shule, I firstly really just wanted to thank, in addition to the speakers who I'll thank in a moment, but all of the attendees, both on Zoom, as well as we have quite a few who are actually watching it on the St Kilda Shule's Facebook page. It's live streaming as well. And it will be recorded for anyone who wants to access it afterwards. They can access that on the St Kilda Shule YouTube page as well. But I did want to take this opportunity. I know, Alex, you referred earlier in your response to how the Jewish way of mourning assisted you through that process to process the grieving and so on. And one of the other Jewish adages which we have in Pirkei Avot talks about the redefinition of strength. Of course, in earlier generations, strength was always defined as the ability to conquer cities and to conquer people and to conquer, entire nations. But the sages told us, Ezehu Gibor, who is truly strong, who has true strength, Hakovesh es Yitzro, it's the person who's able to harness their feelings and harness their emotions, meaning to have the very natural, and in this context, to have the very natural emotions of grief and mourning and loss, but at the same time, rather than become permanently anchored as a result of it, to actually somehow find the strength, the inner strength, which is so much more powerful than the physical strength, to transform some of that energy, the negative energy, into something so positive. And the way in which you've been able to just disseminate so much goodness and kindness and care to other people who are experiencing what you've experienced, I just think speaks absolute volumes, both to you, Alex and Charley, and as well, of course, to your parents, to Lara and to Ben as well, in the way that they raised you to be the mentors that you are, and to give back to the community. So on behalf of everyone here, I wanted to say thank you and kol hakavod for everything that you do for the community. And you really are a remarkable example to so many of us, certainly at this time of year where, tomorrow is the fast of Tammuz. It starts the 3 weeks of Jewish mourning until Tisha B'Av, which is the saddest day of the Jewish year. So it really is an incredible time to talk about this and to give inspiration from a Jewish perspective. So we thank you for that. And finally, I also wanted to thank on behalf of the Shul, you, Timna, for doing a wonderful and a stellar job in moderating this evening and asking questions. And I know as a journalist, you are highly, highly professional. I wasn't entirely accurate before, by the way, when I said that you only ever covered good things about my shul in the paper. You were quite down the line, I have to say. So sometimes when you had to say other things, you did. So kol hakavod to that. But I think tonight you were able to rise to that challenge and do an amazing job to both ask the challenging questions, but on this occasion also to incorporate some of your own personal experience, which is obviously not something you do in the journalistic world. So that was an amazing synthesis, and we thank you for that. On behalf of everyone, we will be logging off now. We've got a lot of thank yous coming in on the comments section. Thank you to all of you and to everyone who was listening. And I want to wish everyone as safe and healthy a lockdown period as possible. And let's hope we come out on the other end sane and strong. Thank you all.